What's up, everyone? Welcome back to ARTV. My name is John, and yes, it's time for one of the biggest year-end countdowns that I do each and every year, the top 10 worst albums of 2018. So many albums this year made me roll my eyes, and that's one thing. Mediocrity is to be expected this day and age, I suppose, when it comes to music, but there were also these candidates that just really crawled under my skin, laid eggs, and then just manifested themselves in the form of the top 10 worst albums of the year. Keep in mind that everything that you're going to see today is my own personal opinion, so do not take it too personally, as I know that you're probably going to, because if you do, then you're probably going to have to cop one of these shirts that's linked in the description down below. Did I sit far away from the camera just to set up that merch plug? You bet your ass I did, but was it worth it? I don't know. Are you guys gonna go pick up merch? Because if so, then yeah, 100%. In all seriousness, thank you guys so much for your support throughout the year-end season. It keeps me extremely busy, on my toes, pulling late nights, so if you would like to contribute to the channel by donating on Patreon or else copying some of my merch, it is the top 2 links in the description down below. We've seen some of my picks for the best and worst music of 2018, but this is something unlike anything else, the worst albums. But before we get to the top 10, hold your horses, we've got some dishonorable mentions. To be honest, I hadn't checked in on Moon Taxi in a while, and when I did come back to them, my god, it seems like the success of their single got to their head, and they made a very flat and generic record. Lil Yachty, of course, makes the list with Nothing to Prove, his second record of the year, and there's a 2 in the title for a reason. Bullet for My Valentine strike back with Gravity, an electronic rock influenced album that mostly falls flat on its face despite a couple of good singles like Don't Need You. Daughtry returned with Cage to Rattle, his first album in about a half decade, and it just makes me wonder, why did he come back? Mumford & Sons dropped Delta, a new album that was very slow, brooding, and it attempts to be thoughtful, but it's really just not, and it's boring. The Neighborhood dropped their self-titled album and a plethora of other EPs and other collections that I don't fully understand. I guess this is here, but I guess you could count all of it because it was all mediocre, bland, and at times bad. And finally, we have Justin Timberlake at the end of the dishonorable mentions, Man of the Woods. This album was all over the place, and it's all JT trying to embrace those southern roots, but he didn't quite know how to tie it all together, so this album just feels like spilled milk. The sheer ignorance and lack of taste that some of those albums presented was definitely disheartening, but it wasn't anything that made me pull down my world to say this needs to go on the top 10. So without further ado, let's start tearing apart some albums. Give a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Here is my number 10 selection. It comes from Quavo, 1/3 of the group Migos. Quavo Stuntin' lands at number 10. Quavo Honcho is the name of this record, featuring this creepy-ass album cover. We've already seen him on a couple of my year-end lists, including the worst album art for the year and also the worst songs of the year because Bubblegum was featured there. This is a record that is extremely long, especially for Quavo. I know that Migos have this thing where they just drop a culture album every January now, apparently, and now they have like 20-some songs on them. Well, Quavo put 19 on his, and he just doesn't have anything to say. It's like the kid who raises their hand in class, and they don't really have the answer, but for some reason they just want to talk. And that's what Quavo and so many other trap rappers and just rappers in general in the mainstream seem to do these days. They just pad up that track list. And here, Quavo sounds like he couldn't even be bothered to come up with an original thought, so he just rambles on about everything and anything that has already been done. And Quavo Honcho definitely, I guess, scratches that itch if you're into boring, generic, filler, mumble, auto-tune bullshit. A year-end countdown for the worst would not be complete without heavy metal band Five Finger Death Punch. Their new record, And Justice for None, edgy title alert, is appearing at number 9 on my list today, and I had to include it just because these guys really never seem to try to step up their content in any way. They're trying to make music that just appeals to a very specific bro-y demographic, the Monster Energy chuggers of the world, the gym lifters of the world, and I suppose that's fine if you need music to get you hyped to an extent, but this music is so brain-numbing, so mindless, so empty, just like everything that Ivan Moody, the lead singer, presents to us. And as I sit here listening through this album, again, suffering for the sake of this video, I sit through something like Champagne, a single that, yes, is a play on the words, obviously champagne like the drink, but champagne, oh boy, it's like fake pain, and Ivan Moody is ready to go off, as he continues to do on the abysmal track that is absolutely a sin and a half, Rock Bottom, which definitely made the cut for my worst songs of the year list. We also have to suffer through another one of their relentlessly awful covers. This time it was the Kenny Wayne Shepherd cover of Blue on Black, which I can't even say was one of the worst songs here. Ivan Moody just continues to put himself out there in unbearable fashion, and whether they're trying to pander to make a ballad like we're going to believe that you're some sort of softie, and the instrumentation that is so dime a dozen, lackluster, boring, and downright awful chug-a-chug-chug, it's music that is for people who don't actually like music. It's for people who like background noise. My Mind Makes Noises lands at number 8 on my list because it's just asinine, it's repetitive, it's looping the same ideas over and over and over again. It's clear that Pale Waves, being signed to Dirty Hit Records, the same label of the 1975 and other bands like that, are influenced by the 1975 and their early sound, like the self-titled and some of their other singles that have come out since then, like She's American, and they take those influences and instead of doing something creative with them, they just kind of cycle through the ideas and keep pressing Control-C over and over and over again. And as I listen through this record that is nearly an hour long, topping the 50-minute mark, there's 14 songs, and I would say a good 8 of them run the same new wave, synth-poppy, alternative, almost trying to be slightly a little bit like goth pop or something, especially with the way that the band dresses, and it just doesn't work out for them because they're playing it super safe and super tame. These songs don't have any snark or bite to them because they don't feel like they are their own product. It doesn't feel like something they've actually created. It just feels like they got inspired by a bunch of different things, whether that be the 1975 films and soundtracks of the 1980s or other things that they just wanted to rip off. And My Mind Makes Noises is just their compilation of all of those things, and then it's shoved in our faces for 50 minutes. Now, I'm not saying that there are no redeeming qualities here, but it's a huge disappointment for me because the band clearly does have the talent to at least put themselves out there, play the music. I think that Television Romance, especially the first few times that I heard it, was pretty solid, but it sours as you hear the record more. And playing through My Mind Makes Noises for this album review once again, and for everything that I've done year in, I just don't want to come back to it because it's a bit insufferable. 32 tracks. 32 fucking songs from Lil Yachty on official studio album releases from Lil Boat himself in 2018. 2 studio albums and a countless amount of other features on other people's songs. It was clear that Lil Yachty was bent on taking over the year and just plastering his face everywhere. So please, just know that even though I had nothing to prove in the dishonorable mentions, it could be interchangeable with Lil Boat too, because I find them both pretty equally terrible. I'm looking at the track list here and I don't even know what to tell you. I listened to something like Love Me Forever and it might be one of the worst love songs that I've ever heard. It floats on for about a minute and a half and just features him kind of cooing and mumbling some bullshit over this weak ass beat. and the production on the majority of this album is so flawed. There are some beats that are okay, but even with like the Quavo album, I can admit that there were beats that were actually pretty damn solid, and there were some songs that I genuinely thought were okay. But with Lil Bo 2, there is nothing that stands out to me in terms of redemption, in terms of something that I'm like, yeah, you know what, this album is bad except for. I don't have the asterisk to put in here. I'm repeating myself, but just like I mentioned with Quavo, these rappers don't have anything to fucking say. They keep churning out projects like they're making cookies in the oven, except the cookies are filled with glitter bombs that are just exploding in our faces. I don't know how to take in this information. I don't know what to do with songs like Talk to Me Nice or Get Money Bros, or especially Boom, which is just abominable. Like, that exists. People enjoy that somehow in some realm of this universe, and that gets my blood boiling right there. It absolutely earned itself a spot on this list, but let's keep going before I burst a blood vessel. What was that one Owl City song where he sings, Anne Marie, I'll never forget you? Well, Anne Marie, darling, here in 2018, I'm unfortunately never forgetting you because of this horrible album. At number 6, we have Speak Your Mind by the British singer-songwriter Anne Marie. It's a 12-song collection if you're counting the standard edition, because you could not pay me to listen to those extra songs on the deluxe edition. I already had to suffer through it for the review, and now I have to suffer through it for the year end. It all started sliding downhill when I first heard the single Friends with the producer and DJ Marshmello. Marshmello makes some pretty tame and boring songs, but Friends is his worst offense to date. He teamed up with the singer to make this travesty. It's a friend zone anthem because, oh god, we all need something to relate to there. Now let's not get carried away. Friends is definitely bad, but is it even the pinnacle of awful on Speak Your Mind? This record is what I would say the musical equivalent of undercooked salmon. It's something that you're looking at and it's like, I don't even know if I really like fish in the first place, but this is like super raw, and now I definitely don't want it. These songs are dime a dozen, and they feel like they could be written by anyone, performed by anyone, and especially on songs like Bad Girlfriend, which really just try to wrap you around their finger with relatability. It's like, oh man, I should have done this, or I could have done this. Guess I'm just a bad girlfriend. Anybody else feeling this? Anybody else relating to that? The album opens up in a little bit more innocuous fashion with a song like Cry, which I could give a shit about. It's not bad, it's not awful, but it's also not very good. See Ya Adios is where I start teetering on the teeter-totter towards negative, and then I just fall out totally on Alarm with that weak drop and the lyrics that are pretty much unforgivable. And then we go into other songs like Perfect, where Anne Marie relates the message and repeats what everybody else has been saying in every pop song for the past 5 years. Oh, don't worry about it. You know, you're not perfect, I'm not perfect, it's fine. And I get it, that's all well and good, but nobody is even holding a candle to the original fucking Perfect by Pink. Ugh, that song is so fucking generic. It's just like washed out versions of other things stirred together in a shit brownie pot. And then at the end of the record, after we've suffered enough, we get through 2002, which, as you guys probably know if you saw my worst songs list, is just... oh, it's a nightmare. But I'll give that a rest for now to talk about the final song on the album, which is called Machine, where Anne Marie talks about how much better things would be if she could just shut off her emotions and be a machine. Wow, what a profound statement, Anne. The statement of the year, in fact. So great that she earned a spot at number 6 on the worst list. For the first time in ARTV history, an artist has landed an album on both the best of the year and the worst of the year list when it comes to albums, and that artist is the one and only Eminem. Now you're probably wondering, John, this came out in late 2017. How could it be eligible for your list? Well, child, thank you so much for asking. And even though I've already said it about 1,000,000 times, every single year, the albums that are released in December of a year count towards the next year, because I didn't start the trend, but publications start putting out their lists in like late November, early December, and yours truly has to keep up. I don't want to waste a ton of time here because I already did an in-depth review breaking down why this album was so awful, but honestly, it just feels like Eminem was off his rocker. Like he didn't know what to make, so he tried to be woke, kinda, but he also tried to be offensive, obviously with songs like Offended. Oh my god, he's being edgy as hell on that one. It just sounds awful. I know what the point of many of these songs were. He was slapping back at creators and other people who had dissed him in the past, and he also just kind of struck out with this record, Revival. It didn't do well in terms of, obviously, sales and other charting presences, but it also tanked with the fans for the most part. Many people who had loved Eminem in the past just were not about this record at all. And sure, Eminem can call people out all he wants. He's like, oh, you saw the track list and made up your mind. I made up my mind once I heard your shitty ass album. This is garbage, and this is coming from a huge Eminem fan. And of course, Kamikaze made my year-end best list for albums. If you don't believe me, go watch that video. It's linked in the outro. But this album right here, it just feels like Eminem couldn't focus at all, and he didn't know if he wanted to be the old M or the new one, or if he wanted to get a hit song with Ed Sheeran or what. And as a result, he really fucks up the listener and leaves them in a bad state of purgatory. Even though Adam Young might be one of the nicest people you'll ever see or meet in music, it doesn't help the case of Cinematic that lands at number 4 at all. This is the album by his project Owl City, of course, the long-awaited one following up Mobile Orchestra, which also made my worst list when that came out in 2015. It was a record that literally was all over the place and seemed so confused and so far away from what Owl City set out to be in the first place. This new album, Cinematic here, takes on 18 tracks, with of course 3 of those being alternate takes. You cannot get a version of the album that doesn't come with those alternate takes, so they're just stuffed at the end of the record. And we get really 15 actual songs here that just feel so stripped away from what I initially liked about Adam Young. The songs here try to go back to his roots in some ways, but the lyrics, instead of feeling dreamy, they just feel very on the nose, like we're hearing very literal representations. And I think a good storyteller, a good artist actually makes you feel like you're going on some sort of journey. And here on Cinematic, it doesn't feel so much like the silver screen as it does a pale adventure into Ghost Town. I really hate to see an artist like Owl City sail into irrelevancy with a bad album like this, but unfortunately, that's the situation that we're given, even though it's not an ideal one. I think that nearly every song here feels like it's void of something, like there's some key component missing, whether it's the music, whether it's the synth tones, or whether it's just the lack of dreaminess and magic that I feel sparks so much of his early work. This is an album that feels like somebody trying to get back to those glory days, like that author that's trying to write his hit novel once again, but it's just not working out, and that's unfortunately Owl City in a nutshell in 2018. Hands over your heart, everyone, because it's time to destroy America. Wow, that actually kind of sounded like a threat. Not my intention at all. I'm talking about the album by 30 Seconds to Mars that lands at number 3 on my top 10 worst list. Even brushing aside that god-awful artwork, yes, I'm talking about every iteration of said artwork, America has nothing of substance to offer from a band that at the very least, kind of stood out from the pack and made somewhat decent alternative rock music. Over the years, it's clear that Jared Leto and company have evolved more and more towards pandering territory with those big, what-oh, millennial whoop-styled choruses. I get it, Jared Leto wants people to sing along in a live setting. That's not an excuse to have weak lyrics on every song on your new album. As a result, you pull the fans all over the place, you pull me over the place, and you just don't have anything to offer the world. Instead, you put out an album. You didn't have to do that, but you did. You pulled the trigger on America, and you blasted it out to the world for nothing. Oh man, if you put this one at number 2, I hate to see what's number 1. And kids, I hate to warn you, but buckle the fuck up. It's true, 6ix9ine didn't top the worst list this year with his album Dummy Boy, and I'll get into why in just a minute, but yeah, this album came out just in time for the worst list. As you know, I have a cutoff date of November 30th for an album to be released to be considered for a year-end list, and Dummy Boy officially got released November 27th, and it was done so with 6ix9ine behind bars, absolutely where he deserves to be. I know a lot of you are wondering how this album didn't hit number 1 on the worst list, and I'll explain like I said. Now 6ix9ine, despite this being his album, doesn't actually show up as much as I thought he would. And I really didn't want to listen to this album, but I knew as much as I talk about 6ix9ine, if I'm gonna make a worst list, I have to at least take him into consideration. But like I said, 6ix9ine actually doesn't get as much time on this record as I thought he would. And this is his album, but instead, he lets his guests pretty much just fill it up like it's a telethon or something, and we're waiting for 6ix9ine to come out. Of course, when he is here, he is being quite insufferable, quite hard to listen to, and very, very grating, just awful all over the place. His lyrics are so degrading, monotonous, and just ruthlessly awful, and that's not something that I can say about a ton of artists, but here, he actually makes me hate him when he does show up, but the fact is that he's not always here. Literally every song out of the 13 has a feature except for Wando, and that one is straight up garbage too. With there being 13 songs, this album actually only runs for about 35 minutes, which is, again, shorter than expected, but I'll fucking take it. Save your ears and skip over this one, just like 6ix9ine skipped over appearing on about half of these songs. The worst of the worst is upon us. 6ix9ine's Dummy Boy couldn't even take over this one as the #1 worst album of 2018, and that album would be Total Anarchy by rapper Lil Xan. Now this album and 6ix9ine's have something in common, in fact. They both have a song called TikTok, which is quite ironic considering both of those songs are utter trash that should be thrown out and recycled immediately, but there's also this app called TikTok, which is probably one of the most cringe-inducing things of the year. All three of them have that going for them, and they're all god-awful. Who the fuck in their right mind would ever give somebody like Lil Xan a record deal? You signed him, you gave him millions of dollars, and you actually funded Total Xanarchy to make it a reality. Seriously, a huge fuck you goes out to anybody who made that contract happen. And now we have this album cover representing this, and it looks like Lil Xan's water just broke and he couldn't be happier about it, and he pretty much just pisses on us with that water for this entire record. It goes on and on and on. You know what? I'm gonna save you from even having to hit play on any of the tracks on this album. I'll do some impressions. Goddamn, Lil Xan the man. Xan's gonna make you, Xan's gonna betray you. I was saved by the bell, yeah, yeah. Xan's gonna make me who I am. Was that enough for ya? Can someone please get this album away from me? I had almost forgotten about it. I was going through and looking for albums for this list, stuff that I had reviewed and discussed in 2018, and I had pushed all of the traumatic music experiences that I had had out of my life, so I thought. But then this one literally reared its ugly head, and there's Lil Xan smiling at me with those face tats and those flaming Cheetos in his mouth, probably. I just don't understand the mindset of Lil Xan and his approach to making music, or his producers, or his collaborators, especially somebody who is actually talented like Charlie XCX. What are you doing on this song Moonlight with him? The producers just literally sit there and spin the beats over and over again, and they sound like they were made in GarageBand, and that is not a compliment. Some people can do great things with that program. However, Lil Xan's team, you are not a part of that compliment. My job here is done. Thank you guys so much for watching my top 10 worst albums of 2018. Let me know what you thought of the list in the comment section down below, and keep in mind that it is just all my opinion, and also, I haven't heard every album that's ever come out in 2018, so maybe that's why a certain album didn't make the list or even the dishonorable mentions. Other than that, then feel free to pick up some merch or donate on Patreon at the top 2 links down below to help videos like this, the harder ones, to keep coming on a monthly basis. And then other than that, drop a like on the video and subscribe if you're new in town. You can tap right here in the corner of the screen if you would like to go directly to my Patreon and help support over there. If you would like to catch up on all of my year-end countdowns, then tap this playlist link right over here, or tap here for another recent video. All of my social media accounts can be found linked in the description, and I'll see you soon for more right here on ARTV.